I'm John Uyghur, and this is our first lesson in CAD 105. We're going to start taking a look at Creo and work through exercise one. But first, we're going to get into a little bit when it comes to setting up the software so that we can work with it a little bit better. But this is our end goal here for exercise number one, is to come up with what is a relatively simple part here. So we're going to do some basic things. We're going to do some sketching, some extruding. We're going to create a hole. We're going to go take it a little bit farther and do some rounds, some chamfers. We're going to hollow that part out. And when we're done, we should have something that looks like that. All right, so in order to get going, and let's go ahead and start a new part file. We have many options here. We're going to get into some of these parts, assemblies, sketching, and then some of the subtypes like sheet metal a little bit later in the course. But for now, we're going to go ahead and start with a simple part. It's going to be a solid file. We're going to give that a name. In this case, I'm just going to call this one E1 because I do already have another version of that file there. And then when we do that, we are brought to our workspace for Creo. And looking at this workspace, for those of you that are familiar with some other CAD softwares, either 3D or 2D versions of those things are going to feel a little bit familiar, but they're definitely going to be a little bit different because in general, CAD softwares are going to look similar. Variations on a theme, really. And there's going to be some differences, definitely, and Creo's no different, certainly. So looking at here, we have a ribbon at the top that has a lot of our tools. We might have some drop-down menus in those certain sections of the ribbon that gives us some additional tools and access to those things. We have different tabs up at the top for different areas of things that we can do, like simulations with the parts that we create and the assemblies that we create, an annotation mode that we'll get into in a couple of assignments. Some additional tools, some applications where we can do things like the rendering of a final part, and a whole lot of other fun things that we could do in Creo to go ahead and digitally and virtually put the part and the assemblies that we create through some paces when it comes to putting stresses to them and all kinds of other things too. Lots and lots of things that we can do. But let's talk about, in general here, we're going to stick in this model tab most of the time. Let's talk about tailoring things a little bit. We have this toolbar, this floating toolbar that's up here that allows us to turn some things on and off. That first one there turns off the CSYS, which is essentially the origin. If you're familiar with some other softwares, it's where everything starts. It's 0 and X, Y, and Z, and it will be the origin point of digital space inside of Creo. Additionally, we can turn on our plane displays so that we can see those. So we can go ahead and pick where we're going to start a sketch off on there. But before we go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and look at some of the settings that we have available here, which are under that file menu in the upper left corner. A left click to get into most things. Creo is a little bit different than some other softwares. It likes to use that center mouse button, that center click, a little bit more than some others do. So that might take a little bit of getting used to. If it's the first one you've used, it's not going to be a difficult transition for you. All right, so we're going to get into look at some of those settings that we can change. Okay, and we have some options here. We have the ability to go into the prepare menu under file. Is going to allow us to set some things on here which are going to be important as we get started. Things like units that are used by default. Creo set up to go ahead and use imperial units, so inches, because I'm in the US and we still love the imperial system for some reason, even though the rest of the world says otherwise, but here we are. So most of you are going to be used to that, so we're going to go ahead and stick with it for now. But this does gives you the ability to go ahead and change some of those things in here, change those options, change those units, uh, to millimeters, kilograms, seconds, instead of using the default of inches, pounds, and seconds. You go ahead and choose that other option that you want to change to. If I wanted to change to millimeters, I could change that, hit set, and my units will change. I want to keep that in inches. The nice thing is that if you want to go ahead and change from one to the other, say for example, you've created a drawing in millimeters and you want to go ahead and convert it to inches, you can simply just go into this model property setting and go ahead and make that change, and everything will get converted for you throughout that part file or that assembly file for you. Those are the big things really in this particular menu. There's some other things with properties that we can go ahead and assign materials to them. So that if you're modeling a part that you know is going to be cut on a CNC out of aluminum, a particular type of aluminum, you can go ahead and specify that material so that as you go ahead and create the part, everything about the part, the properties of that part will reflect that material. So for example, if it's going to be out of 6061 aluminum, you're going to go ahead and set that material on there. And then if you create a part in there, Creo's going to tell you, here's what you should expect for weight for that part given that material. And then you can also take that part and put it into some of those simulation modes and go ahead and stress test things and do some other things with it so that you can essentially test that digital version of that part even before you even create a prototype, which is one of the really cool functionalities of Creo and many others as well. So let's close up those properties. We're going to leave things set in inches, and we're going to come back to File, and we're going to go look at this Options menu down at the bottom here and choose Options at the top. And this is where we can really do some things to change how we have the look of things. For example, if you like, we have a light theme, a dark theme available on here. Some of you like to mess around with that. I usually just leave things standard when it comes to that and leave that light mode on there. You can change how things look. I'm just going to leave things essentially the default way that the software is set up. Really, the only thing that's going to look different to you is how my mouse appears, because it's a little bit larger than it should be, and it's in yellow just to help it stand out a little bit more amongst the sea of white. Typically, I don't use a giant cursor, but to help you all out a little bit, we're going to go ahead and run with that for now. So let's see some other things here. There are lots and lots of settings. And one suggestion that I have for you, especially if you're starting out with a new software and as you're getting into modeling or 2D design, is unless you're really sure what something does, don't go and change settings. Okay, the interface can get blown up on you in a hurry. Things can go sideways, and it can get really hard to figure out sometimes how to get back to where you were. So until you get to a point where you're comfortable with where things are, how a flow of a project goes within the software, don't try to reinvent things right off the bat. And now, if you're coming from another software and you like things laid out a certain way and you want to kind of mirror that experience so that it's a little bit more familiar, go right ahead and do that. But for those of us that are relatively new, those of you who might be new to this software, let's go ahead and not try and reinvent things right off the bat. Okay, so let's take a look through and just peek through some of these different options that we have. Okay, a very important one is found in the core section under Sketcher. Okay, the decimal places, the accuracy of dimensions can be changed. By default, it's typically going to be at 2. I typically will leave mine at 3 decimal places, depending on the project that I'm working on. Usually that's going to give you most things. If I'm going to be designing something that's going to be, cut on a CNC machine, the tolerance is within a couple thousandths. We're going to probably kick that up a little bit higher, but for now, we're going to keep things nice and easy and keep it at 3 places there. Lots of other options to get into here as far as how things go. The model display one is another one that I will show you because by default, Creo sets up your orientation angle at trimetric. Coming from Autodesk stuff, which I've used primarily over the years, I'm more used to an isometric view on things. So typically I will change to isometric. Also, just when it comes to drafting standards and design standards and throughout time, that isometric is definitely going to be the more common thing. So it's going to feel a little more natural for those of you that have been there and done that a little bit. So I'm going to change mine to isometric, leave that. Any settings that you change during the course of things, go ahead and hit that apply, hit OK. And then it's going to ask you if you want to write it to a configuration file to override that thing so that each time that you open it up, you'll still have those settings there. And that's what I've done there. All right, so back to the space. Let's look at going ahead and getting into our first project, our first exercise. And let's pop over. And if you don't have your copy of our text here opened up, a couple things you can do. You can find it first. It is on D2L. If you go to exercise 1, okay, we go to those assignments. And then we go find exercise 1. You will find that. I'm going to go back to content because I'm looking at my version of it rather than yours. If you go to the main page here under content and you scroll down a little bit, you're going to find a link to the textbook right there. So you can go ahead and download it right there. Or if you want to go right to the Britannia website, that's Chris Sikora's website, our longtime ECC instructor who has put these materials together, which are fantastic, and provided them free to all of you, saving you the cost of yet another text for course, which is awesome. You can find the books and also Chris's videos on some of these assignments, all these assignments at Britannia1.com. That's VERTANUX1.com. And you can come and find those instruction manuals and work Creo Parametric Basics. And you will go ahead and find the text and go ahead and download it. And then you will have that PDF of the book available to you. Again, I'm a little bit more old school. I went ahead and printed mine so that I have that copy at my disposal, sitting off to the side so I can peek at dimensions whenever I might need to do so. All right, so let's get back into Creo. And in our starting place here, we've started a new part file. So here we are in our digital design space. And the first decision that we need to go ahead and make when we're starting out is where we're going to create a sketch. And we talked about the CSYS as our origin. Each one of these surfaces is a plane in digital space on which we can choose to start a drawing, to start a sketch. All right, so the planes are all labeled. This is the front plane. This is the right plane, top plane. Okay, so everything as you circle around is going to give you those labels. And typically we're going to draw most things on the front plane. Really, the planes become a little bit more important if you're going to, depending on the manner in which you're going to produce a part. So if you're going to 3D print something, it might lend, the decision might become a little bit more apparent depending on the method with which you're going to produce something down the road. Okay. That doesn't make sense quite yet. It will later on. So we're going to start out on this front one. And we have choices in Creo when we want to go ahead and start a part file, or we know we're going to start an extrusion, or we're going to start a revolute type of part. We're going to revolve a sketch around something. We can go right into those tools and skip the step of choosing that sketch, but we're going to go ahead and choose sketch just so the process kind of makes a little bit more sense. And then our first thing we have to do after we choose and click on that sketch button is we have to go ahead and figure out, where that thing's going to be. We already had the front plane selected on there. So that is where we are. Now, at this point, once you get things going, you have some options. You can go ahead and turn off some of these things if you don't want to see them again. That's CSYS and those planes. I'm going to turn the planes off because they're a little distracting as we get started on things. So, all right. So we have things. Let's talk about a little bit about navigation stuff. All right. So we have our left mouse button. So we have a left click, a right click, and we have our scroll wheel in the middle, which can be clicked and we can scroll in and out with. So if we scroll in and out with on that scroll wheel, we're able to zoom in and out. Okay, and the nice thing about Creo and when we're working with a model is that wherever we leave this mouse pointer, this cursor, wherever that is lying on a part is going to help us center where we're going to head and zoom in on things. So let's get going here with the sketch, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that navigation when it comes to it, because it makes a little bit more sense when we have something there. So we want to go ahead and get sketching on here. So the first thing we're going to do is we have our sketching tools available to us, and line tools, rectangle tools, circle tools. All of these have sub-type tools for the most part, different variations on those tools to help us do specific jobs. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that rectangle tool. And then I'm going to choose where I want to start. Now here's where I'm going to change things a little bit. See how we're still in that isometric view? I want to go ahead and change so I'm looking straight on. I want to be thinking about this like I'm sitting at my desk. There's a piece of paper on my desk, and I want to be looking down at that piece of paper as I'm sketching on it, as I'm drawing on it, just as if it was a piece of paper and I had a pen in hand and I was sketching on my desktop in front of me. So if I want to go ahead and change that view up at the top here, there's these orientations. And if I go to, we're in standard orientation right now, which we set as that isometric. And I'm going to go to that front one. So now my perspective changes. I'm in that proper place. So I'm looking from the top down. It's that God's eye view so I can see what's going on. And now I'm still in that rectangle tool. So I'm going to left click on my first point and see how my cursor, as it snaps to things, which is where it jumps and locks into something temporarily, like it is on this vertical plane, and it is now on that horizontal one. Okay, we're going to click left on that origin one time. And then we're going to drag up and we're going to create a rectangle that looks pretty close in size to what we're looking for here. Okay, the dimensions on that guy, I want to say are 3 by 5. All right, so we're going to make a rectangle, excuse me, like that. I go back and, yeah, about 3 by 5. Okay, so let's go back to our other file. And we have our rectangle there. So it's our rough rectangle. When we're drawing something, when we're creating something here, we really want to get close at first. And then through the use of constraints, which are things that help us lock certain elements and aspects of that design in place, and dimensions, we're going to refine what we want. Okay, so if we know that we want a particular dimension on something like a 3-inch by 5-inch, we're going to go ahead and set that in there. So let's go ahead and do that 3 by 5. But how do we do that? All right. So if we go in, and here's where things get a little bit odd. Okay, for those of you that have done different stuff before. When we click on a line, we want to go ahead and we want to see the dimensions. So we want to go ahead and click the center click, which is that center scroll wheel. We're going to click on that. If we left click on a line, we get some options that come up that are some editing options that we can make some changes to the line. We can add a dimension to that line. We can remove a dimension from things. We can do lots of things with that, but we want to just see the dimensions. So right now, we click on that center, and we see that we have a really big rectangle. It's 128 inches high and almost 75 inches wide. We don't want to go that crazy, so we're going to go ahead and double left click on here and go ahead and edit this. And the neat thing is when you change a dimension in this one, Creo goes ahead and scales things appropriately. So the relationship is maintained between the two. So we're 5 inches tall, and we're going to go 3 inches wide. Okay. And we're going to lock that in. All right. So let's talk about navigating a little bit here. All right. So we have our refit, which is going to center everything and bring it up to a maximum size. We know that we can go back to orientations. Go to standard to change that to that again. We're going to go back to the front, square things back up again so that it looks very, very nice for us. All right. So we need to go ahead and do something with this rectangle. We want to extrude that thing. We want to bring it into that third dimension. We want to create that three-dimensional model. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my perspective just so you can see a little bit better. We're going to go to standard, so we're in that isometric. We have that sketch that is created there. We're going to go ahead and hit OK to save that sketch and exit. And we see that that plane is there. Okay. We're going to go ahead and choose this extrude option right up here. And by default, it's going to go ahead and extruding basically will allow you to pull something, pull a sketch into the 3 dimensions or push it and create it into and bring it into that third dimension. We're going to go ahead and extrude this guy and bring it out and set the depth of that to 1/2 inch. Which we can do one of a couple ways. We can grab this yellow dot and stretch it out and do the inaccurate thing. When we're at 3 decimal places, it gets to be a little bit harder to lock and knock right down and get right on that 0.5 inches. So we can either come up here and set that depth to 0.5. Okay. I'm going to mess that up again a little bit. Or I can come right here and type that in and hit enter there. All right. We have some options here that we can mess around with, which is going to be important for some of these tools. Body options and properties. We're going to keep it simple for now. We're just going to hit OK. Just want to give you some insight into some other things that are going around that are going to become important later, just to kind of introduce them a little bit initially. All right, so we have the first part of this piece completed. Now we need to go ahead and create a secondary step because we got to create this secondary part of this feature. We need a projection that happens right here. So in order to create that projection, we're going to start another sketch on the plane here, on the face of that object. So we can either do that and create a sketch and create it on there, or this time we're just going to go right to extrude. And it's going to start us off in that sketching mode, right? Because we need to go ahead and extrude something first and sketch something before we go ahead and extrude it. So we need to do the secondary feature here. Is going to be 1.5 inches tall. So I'm going to use a rectangle again. I'm going to go and snap to that bottom corner, left click once, and I'm going to drag out and see here as we get to the edge, we get that snap. That's where the one of the really nice things about Creo is that it does a really good job of helping. It's very intuitive. There is what we would call AI now, referred to it as commonly as AI, right? Features in there. So the program is looking at what you're drawing, what you're doing, and it's inferring from what you're doing essentially where you would like a constraint to be. And again, a constraint is something that helps you set things up. It might tell that two lines are parallel to each other, that they're coincident, that they meet at a point. Okay. And it can do lots of other things. They're concentric, but it's gone ahead and given us one there. So let's go ahead and make sure that dimension is good. So we're going to center click on one of those lines so we get the dimensions, and we see that we're not quite where we want to be. That's a really ugly number. Let's get it to 1.5. Lock that in there and hit OK. And then as soon as we hit OK, since we started in that extrude mode, we're already into that extrude mode already, and we're going to make the depth of that one, the thickness of this one here, going to go in at a 0.5. And we're going to hit OK. We have some options here. We're just going to go with the default, which is going to join that new extrusion to the original one so that there's one body. And then as we come back out and we center things up and we look, we're almost there when it comes to the basic version of that. So we're going to go ahead and create a hole. When we create a feature, which is what the hole will be on this part, we need to do a couple things. We need to dimension what the size of that thing is going to be, what the size of the hole is going to be. And then we need to locate it. Where is that hole going to exist in relation to some of these edges, some of these faces on the part? So we're going to end up with this hole up here somewhere about. So let's go ahead and change that orientation so we can look at things from the front. We're going to go ahead and we're going to do a sketch. We're going to click right here. And we want to go ahead and sketch on that face there. We're going to choose the circle tool. There are many circle options on here. We're going to do a center and point one. And again, we're not worried about being 100% right on size and all that stuff right off the bat. Don't get married to that. It's got to be perfect right off the bat. We're going to set it up. All right, so we got the hole. It's a left click to start at the center, a left click to end it after you've dragged out the mouse. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and to escape a tool, we can double click that center button, that scroll wheel on there a couple of times. And here we go. Here we got our location. All right, so it says right now the diameter of our hole, what will be our hole, is that ugly number. We want it 1/2 inch. And then we want the center of that hole to be 1 inch from this edge and then 1 inch from this edge. So we have a dimension that's already added in there for us right there. So we're going to adjust that one. And then we have this other one down at the bottom here that's going from the wrong edge. We want to locate it from this edge and this edge, not from this one. So what we can do is we can go ahead and we can left click on that one. And then we're going to go ahead and choose this option that says replace, and that removes that one. So then we're going to go to, we're going to replace that one. Okay, so we're going to let it highlight. We're going to left click on there. We're going to replace. And then we're going to go to dimension. We're going to click on that top edge. We're going to click on the center. We're going to drag out. And then when we want that dimension to appear, this is the weird thing with Creo. If you've come from somewhere else, we're going to click that center button. And then that dimension is going to pop up. And then notice this other one went away. It's gone. So we're going to enter that 1. And there we go. We got 1 inch from there, 1 inch from the edge. We're right there. And we're going to go ahead and put that hole into things. And then I'm looking at it. Oh, my dimensions are right on there. Scale looks a little bit weird. Is my hole too small? I almost feel like it is. Yeah, it is. So this hole doesn't look quite right. It should be 3/4 of an inch in size. So let's go back to that and let's edit that dimension, 0.75. Hit enter. Now we're looking a little bit better. All right, so we've got our feature. It's dimensioned in size. It is located as well. The center is located. And we're going to go ahead and hit OK. We're good with that. Now let's go ahead and extrude. Again, Creo's pretty intuitive. We just finished that sketch, selecting that by default. Let's go ahead and change that orientation so that we can see it a little bit better. And then when we do that, we see that by default it's saying, hey, I think you want to make a new extrusion, which is going to be a positive thing, and it has extruded out. But in reality, we want to actually cut through that thing. So we're going to zoom in here a little bit and look at this arrow. And this is the direction. So this is the extent of that extrusion. And then this little arrow is the direction. So notice when I turn it around, it's removing material instead of creating material. All right. So we're going to go ahead and set that. I want to set this right now, change instead of a number, because what if I change my dimensions later? I'm just going to set this to be through all. So that hole is always, even if we made this part thicker, it's always going to go all the way through. So if we look at this right now, according to the book, at this point, exercise 1 is complete. Let's take a look at it and talk about a couple of other options for viewing things. As we're looking at this, remember that we have those planes that are hidden on here. We can bring that CSYS and see that here, or turn it off, get rid of those things. Put the mouse at the center of the part here. It's always going to spin wherever your mouse is located. That's going to be the center point of rotation. And again, you're going to click and hold in that center scroll wheel. And as you're holding it, you're going to move the mouse, and that's going to allow you to rotate around your view around the object. Go back to that center there. This setting right here is the spin center. When we turn that one on, things are always going to spin then, regardless of where I do that, around the center axis of that part, which is really nice. So that means you don't have to always get back to the center of it again and spin it, because if you don't have that on and you're spinning from over here, things get really weird and you can lose sight of that thing and it can go off into space, and it gets to be a little disorienting at first as you're getting into it. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and set this up so that we have it in that standard orientation. We're filling up that whole screen, and we're going to go ahead and cut it off right there. All right, so I will put up a secondary video in this lesson that goes a little bit farther with this one and takes a look at at least one of those labs. Remember, each lesson we have an exercise, which is the main project that we're going to go through together. And then you're going to have 1 to 2 labs that go along with that, which are other things that I encourage you strongly to go through and work on your own first. See how you do with it, and try and knock those out. And if you run into problems, then come back and grab the video. Okay, I'm not going to have a video up for every lab. There might be 1 or 2 that aren't there, but I feel like those are the ones that you're going to be benefited most from working through on your own. And probably they're going to be the ones that are a little bit easier. Remember, too, that you'll have my videos for support. And then also, if you go to the Vertani website and to Mr. Sikora's website there and find his wonderful material, you're going to have his videos to look at as well. for extra coverage on things. So that's a wrap up on exercise 1. Let's go ahead and make sure that we save that thing before we go away. So we're going to go ahead and save that. Okay. Before we leave, Creo will kind of, after a certain amount of time, yell at you a little bit and say, hey, did you want to save this? And remember, too, when we're submitting these things, that we're going to go ahead and not send in the Creo file. We'll want to go ahead and do a print. So we want to create a PDF. So we're going to go to Quick Print. So we're going to print, Quick Print. Choose that PDF creation software on there. If you run Windows, which you probably are, the default one's going to be that Microsoft Print to PDF. If you have Acrobat in there, it might go with that. We're going to go ahead and just hit the OK on there. And then we're going to save a PDF. I'm going to call it exercise 1. And then my last name. Okay. I'm going to save it. And then that's what I'm going to go ahead and submit over on D2L for exercise 1. All right, that's it. Hopefully that helped. If you have questions, remember, reach out, email jweger@elgin.edu. All right, we'll see you soon for the going farther on this one and for the exploration of at least one of the labs in exercise 1.